Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today I am going to be wrapping up and talking about all the books that I read in the month of November. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So I like to share the different graphics that the Storygraph makes available to me as a reader. That is the app that I use to sort of log everything that's going on in my reading life. So let's go ahead and look at the overview of my month. Here is a quick summary of what my month looked like. I read a total of 7 books, and I have to say, overall, this was a pretty great reading month for me. It's a reading month where I feel like I got back up to sort of a normal amount of books for me to read in a month, and I also hit my page count goal, which is usually what I focus more on. I try to read 3,000 pages a month. This month, I read 3,500 pages. And it may seem like all these numbers don't add up when you look at the 7 books, the number of pages I read, and that little slot that says that average book length. That is not going to get me all necessarily up to 3,500 words. And when we get into some of the other graphics, it'll become clear like how this all happened and worked out. But anyway, I always love seeing what my 3 highest rated books were for the month. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting combination and mix up. So let's go ahead and look at exactly what were all the books that I read or was working on in the month of November. Okay, so here we have on the screen all the books that I read this month, or more accurately, all the books that I finished this month. So some of them, like Our Mutual Friend, I actually started in the month of October and didn't finish until this month. And in the third graphic I show you, we will cover all the books that I started in the month of November but didn't actually finish until December. I had 3 books that I rated 2 stars. One was Lacuna by Barbara Kingsolver, and the other one, it's kind of hard to read the title on this graphic, but is City of Glass by Paul Auster. And I have to say, when looking back at these books now, having had a little space from them, because both of them I read closer to the beginning of this month, I have to say that I kind of feel like maybe I rated the Lacuna a little too low and rated City of Glass a little too high. Because especially when I think about these 2 books together, I can't help but think I would not give them the same ratings. I did not feel the same about these books. I would honestly say, when I look back at it, that I really just didn't like The City of Glass. Like, it wasn't horrible, it wasn't awfully written, anything like that. It's just kind of a weird book and not in a good way for me. And if I could go back, which technically I can, but I'm not going to. But if I wanted to go back, I would probably go back and rate this like somewhere in the twos. And then with the Lacuna, I kind of have the opposite feeling where I feel like a 3 is maybe a little too low for it. I did mention a couple of times this year that I wasn't giving books half stars, and we'll talk about the 2 on here that do have partial star ratings. But as far as the Lacuna goes, it is definitely a book where if I was consistently giving books half stars, I, looking back on it, probably would have given this book more 3.5 star. I just really couldn't end up deciding on how I wanted to rate it. That brings me to my mid 3 stars. I don't even remember giving these books these partial ratings. So, way to confuse myself. But I do get why I gave them partial ratings. Let's start by talking about Our Mutual Friend. So, Our Mutual Friend, I read, it was part of my Drood project. It's one of the books by Charles Dickens in my Charles Dickens project where I'm trying to read all of his works. And so it was a book that I needed to read. I had really high expectations for this book. I know for some people it's their favorite Charles Dickens book, and I know other people don't feel that way. And I was one of those people who I was like, yeah, this is definitely not going to be my favorite Charles Dickens. It was good. There were definitely some good moments in it, but I think that was the problem I had with it, was there were moments. There were moments of his writing that I really enjoyed. There were moments in the book that was intriguing. But at the end of the day, like, I read Bleak House the month before, and I like Bleak House better than I like Our Mutual Friend. I thought a lot of this book dragged. I wasn't super into the mystery, that like crime solving that was kind of going on in it. And at the end of the day, I mainly just felt like I was kind of pushing through so that I could get to read Drood. That said, it's still a Charles Dickens book. It still was a better book than a lot of the other books that I read this month. For instance, City of Glass. If I compare it to the Lacuna, I would say it's probably right on line with that, which is why I'm like, why did I rate the Lacuna so low? Probably because I was trying not to give half stars. Oh well. And then the second book on here that has a partial star rating is The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay. And a 3.75 star, I'm just going to flat out blame on the fact that I listened to the abridged audiobook. Not on purpose. It was a complete accident. You can go back and hear all about how that happened. It worked out super well for the fact that I was going to see the opera. However, I really had been meaning to read the entire book in the reread. And the audiobook definitely left some plot hole gaps where there were like time jumps, and it just made things a little confusing that if I hadn't read the book before, I don't know that I would have enjoyed it. And so that was the reason I didn't give it a 4. I really think if I had reread this book, either in a physical edition or the unabridged audio, that it would have either been a solid 4 stars or maybe even 5 stars for me. But oh well, coulda, shoulda, I didn't. I had 2 4-star books, and these are again 2 books that I'm going, how did they end up with the same rating? So I had Warbreaker and Drood, and Warbreaker is one that, again, I feel like should probably be a little lower than a 4-star, and Drood I feel comfortable with as being like a solid 4-star read. However, when I compare the two, I again don't feel like these books should be getting the same rating for me. So I'm definitely going into 2025 reconsidering how I give my books their ratings, because it's not all lining up. That's basically what I'm realizing this month. So let me talk about Warbreaker. I finished this. I believe I talked about my final thoughts on it in my last weekly reading wrap up. And my basic thoughts were it was just too much court politics for me. I just wasn't feeling all the politicking going on throughout the whole book. I really wanted it to be a more action-based adventure story, and it just wasn't that. And this was definitely a book that helped me realize that court politics in books really aren't my thing. In fact, politics in books really aren't my thing, if that is one of the central ideas. I don't mind it being in my book in general. I just don't want it to be a major plot line. And in Warbreaker, it is definitely part of like the plot line. It really is the plot line. That's the main plot you're following. I actually think the story with the sisters is kind of a subplot to all the court politics, but that's just me. That said, I think the fact that I initially gave it a 4 just demonstrates like how much I thought like this is a good book. Like it was good. It wasn't just okay. It was actually good. And usually for me, a 4-star does mean it's good. And that may be part of the problem, is that a 3 means it was okay and a 4 means good for me. And I don't know that those definitions are working that well. Anyway, moving on to Drood. Drood was like everything that I was hoping it was going to be, and unfortunately not more than that. It was a great read. I'm so glad I read all the books leading up to that, and you can go and check out the playlist that I have that talks all about my book project, the Drood Project, and I've talked about it in weekly reading wrap-ups and done videos just on it, and that project is done. I will continue to read Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins, but not in relation to trying to read Drood, which mentions a whole bunch of works by both of them, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But it deserved the 4-star it got. It was a really good book, and I'm glad I read it. Finally, I clearly have the one 5-star read, Augustown. Again, I went over why I gave this 5 stars at length in my weekly reading wrap up for it. And I have to say that overall, I'm questioning whether or not I actually like audiobooks and whether they work for me or if they actually lead to an unpleasant reading experience. But this is one of the books that makes me question that thought, because I read this entire book as an audiobook, except for maybe the last 5 or 10 pages, and I loved it. I thought it was a great audiobook experience. It worked well as an audiobook. I think there were parts of the book that were enhanced because I was listening to it via audio. And I can't say that for every book. And in fact, I feel like I say that for very few audiobooks. So this book is like kind of like complicating my life with that. But there's a part of me that's like, no, really, probably what happened is that this book in and of itself is so good that it made the audiobook experience for me even better than it normally would have been. Either way, it's a 5-star. I recommend reading it. And finally, let's look at my calendar for the month. I worked really hard this month at trying to make sure I was updating Storygraph, not necessarily on a daily basis, but like with when I was reading what pages of the book when, so that my calendar would be pretty accurate. And for the month of November, I think it is. I love this graphic. The only thing that I did not like on this graphic actually was on the 7th. On the 7th, for some odd reason, it overlapped the 2 books that I finished that day. And so you can't actually see one of them. So you can see I finished Drood on the 7th. What you can't see is that underneath it is The Amazing Adventures of Kavalier and Clay. There are a couple of gaps and days where I didn't read, and I think that's pretty accurate. And I think it's interesting to note that most of those days are surrounding books that I rated fairly low. Makes sense. And then the second part of this graphic is actually the lower half of it. And it's just easier for me to not show the whole graphic all at once because then you can see it larger on your screen. But this portion of this graphic shows all the books that I read or was currently reading this month. You can see all the books that I have finished. They all have the star ratings there again. And then you can see all the books that I was also reading. The only book on here that I think is confusing is Auster and Lucinda. You can see that one on here. And if you watch my last weekly reading wrap up, or maybe it was the one before that, you'll know I did finish Auster and Lucinda in the month of November. But the reason it's showing as a currently reading is because I have a bind up of 2 books by Peter Carey, Auster and Lucinda, the one that I finished, and The True History of the Kelly Gang, which is the second half of the book you see pictured here. And since I haven't read that yet, technically I haven't finished that specific edition of the book. Finally, I also want to talk about very quickly my Song of the Month, which is something I have not been very consistent about doing each month, but I do have on my Discord channel a special channel that is for the book Year of Wonder. This is a book that I am consistently working through, but not updating on the story graph, so it doesn't show up. So I probably need to start doing that as of December somehow. I don't know how. I'll probably just update it once during the month just to remind myself to mention it. But anyway, I am still working my way through Year of Wonder, which shares one piece of classical music to listen to every day. And each week on my Discord channel, I post what my favorite song of the week was. And each month I list what my favorite song of the month is. And there's a couple of us that are all sort of like going along and keeping up and sharing sort of our musical discoveries with that. In the month of November, I ended up having my favorite song be this one, which I will put up on the screen. And this is the piece that I basically said I'm choosing because if I was ever going to haunt someone after dying, this is the music that I would like to be played along with my haunting. So go listen to it if you're interested to know what that would sound like. And then finally, I want to talk about a couple of things that I have upcoming in the month of December. First, on December 14th from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., I will be hosting reading sprints. This is on a Saturday, and it is themed Bring Your Own Christmas Story. And I will provide a link in the cards and in the description box below where you can find all about that little read along. And it should just be a day of cozy fun and Christmassy, wintry story vibes. So hopefully you can make that join if you want. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more of what I am doing in December and what my plans are going to be going into the new year, be sure to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it and would like more monthly wrap-ups, because I do have to be honest that I'm not sure I'm going to continue doing monthly wrap-ups or at least standalone videos on them going into 2025. So I definitely need some feedback as to whether or not you'd like to see me continue to do this specific monthly video. That's it for today. Let me know how your month of reading went, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.